Number. The delivery boy. First document. Marcus Chen had always been terrible at making life decisions. At 23, he was still delivering packages for Interstellar Express, while his college friends climbed corporate ladders on distant worlds. His beat-up cargo hauler, the Times Lucky Strike asterisk, barely passed safety inspections, and his bank account stayed permanently red. But Marcus had one thing going for him that he didn't even know about yet. He was really, really good at languages. Not in the way most people thought of being good at languages. Marcus couldn't conjugate verbs or remember grammar rules to save his life. Instead, he absorbed sounds, patterns, and meanings like a sponge soaking up water. He picked up Martian trade dialect from overheard conversations at spaceports. He learned Centauri curse words from angry dock workers. He even knew enough of the clicks and whistles of the aquatic Nereid language to order fish at their underwater restaurants. His supervisor, Janet, called it a useless party trick. "Chen, you're supposed to deliver packages, not chat with every alien you meet," she'd say, waving her tablet at him. "Your efficiency ratings are garbage because you spend 20 minutes talking to customers about their pet space slugs, or whatever." Marcus never argued back. He needed this job, even if it barely paid enough to keep his ship fueled and his tiny apartment rented. So he kept his mouth shut, delivered his packages, and tried not to think about how his life was going absolutely nowhere. Everything changed on a Tuesday. The package pickup was routine. A small, environmentally sealed container from the University of New Geneva's Xenoarchaeology Department. The destination was Kepler Station, a research outpost orbiting a gas giant in the Vega system. 3-day round trip. Standard hazard pay. Nothing unusual. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the xenoarchaeologist who handed him the package, seemed nervous. She was a small woman with graying hair and intense brown eyes that kept darting around the loading dock like she expected someone to jump out from behind a cargo container. "This is extremely fragile," she told Marcus, her hands shaking slightly as she passed him the sealed case. "Temperature controlled, shock resistant, absolutely no scanning or opening under any circumstances. The recipient is Dr. Kesara Velthani at the Vegan Institute. She's expecting it." Marcus nodded, signing the electronic manifest on his tablet. "No problem, Doc. I'll treat it like my grandmother's china." Dr. Martinez didn't smile at his joke. Instead, she grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something. This artifact is over 50,000 years old. It's the first intact example of pre-war Velthani writing we've ever found." She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus got the message. He carefully secured the case in his ship's specialized cargo hold, running through all the safety checks twice. Whatever was in that box was worth more money than he'd see in 10 lifetimes. The first 2 days of the trip passed without incident. Marcus spent most of his time in the pilot's chair, reading cheap adventure novels and listening to music, while the autopilot handled the boring parts of interstellar travel. The Times' Lucky Strike times wasn't fast, but she was reliable, and the steady hum of her engines was almost comforting. On the 3rd day, everything went sideways. Marcus was dozing in his chair when the proximity alarm started shrieking. He jerked awake to see 3 ships on his scanner, sleek, predatory vessels with no visible registration marks. Pirates. "Attention cargo vessel," came a gravelly voice over the comm system. "Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and we'll turn you into space dust." Marcus's hands flew over his control panel, but he already knew it was hopeless. The Times, Lucky Strike Times, was a cargo hauler, not a fighter. Her shields were civilian grade, her weapons were non-existent, and her top speed was laughable compared to military craft. "Look, guys," Marcus said into his comm pickup, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just a delivery boy. I've got nothing worth stealing, except some university research stuff. That's exactly what we're here for." "Meet," the pirate replied. "That little package you picked up from New Geneva? Our employer wants it very badly. Hand it over, and maybe we'll let you keep breathing." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Someone had leaked information about the shipment. But who? And why was a 50,000-year-old artifact worth hiring pirates? Before he could think of an answer, the pirates opened fire. The first blast rocked the Times. Lucky Strike Times like a toy in a hurricane. Warning lights flashed red across Marcus's control panel as the ship's shields flared and died. The second blast punched through the hull near the engine compartment, sending sparks and smoke throughout the cramped corridors. Hull breach in Section 4, the ship's computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice. Engine efficiency at 60%. Life support stable. Marcus fought with the controls, trying to coax more speed from his dying ship. The pirates were playing with him now, taking careful shots to disable rather than destroy. They wanted that package intact. The third blast took out his main engines completely. The Times, Lucky Strike Times, tumbled helplessly through space, emergency power barely keeping life support online. Through his view screen, Marcus watched one of the pirate ships approach, its docking clamps extended like mechanical claws. He had maybe 5 minutes before they cut through his airlock. Marcus unbuckled himself from the pilot's chair and ran toward the cargo hold. Maybe he could jettison the package, deny them their prize even if it meant his own death. But when he reached the sealed case, something strange happened. The container was warm. Not just warm, it was practically vibrating with heat. The temperature gauges showed normal readings, but Marcus could feel energy radiating from whatever was inside. As he touched the case's surface, he heard something impossible. Singing. Not with his ears, the cargo hold was silent except for the hum of failing life support systems. But somehow, Marcus could hear voices singing in harmonies so complex and beautiful that his eyes filled with tears. The melodies seemed to reach directly into his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. And strangest of all, he understood the words. The language was nothing he'd ever heard before. It wasn't the clicking of Nereid speech or the musical tones of Centauri dialects. This was something older, deeper, filled with concepts that human languages didn't even have words for. Yet somehow, Marcus knew what the singers were saying. They were singing about home, about loss, about waiting through endless dark years for someone to remember their names. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered. But even as he said it, more understanding flooded his mind. The singers weren't just voices. They were people, real individuals who had lived and loved and died thousands of years before humanity ever looked up at the stars. And they were trying to tell him something important. The airlock alarm chimed. The pirates had docked. Marcus could hear them cutting through his ship's outer door with industrial torches. He had maybe 2 minutes before they reached the cargo hold. His hands moved without conscious thought, opening the sealed case. Inside, nestled in foam padding, was a crystal tablet covered in flowing script that seemed to move and shimmer in the light. The moment Marcus's fingers touched its surface, the singing voices became a roar of joy and recognition. They knew him. Not Marcus Chen, failed delivery boy from Earth's slums. They knew something deeper, something that had been sleeping in his genetic code since humanity first learned to speak. The voices welcomed him like a long-lost child coming home after years of wandering. And suddenly, Marcus could read every symbol on the tablet's surface. It wasn't just a record or an artifact. It was a key, a genetic lock that had waited 50,000 years for someone with the right bloodline to open it. The symbols showed star maps, technological blueprints, and most importantly, the location of something called the Velveni Archive, a hidden repository of knowledge from a civilization that had ruled the galaxy when humanity's ancestors were still learning to make fire. The cutting sounds from the airlock grew louder. Any second now, the pirates would break through. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He pressed his palm flat against the crystal tablet and spoke the words the ancient voices whispered to him. Not in English or any human language, but in the deep tongue of the Velthani people. The syllables felt strange in his mouth, like trying to pronounce music. But somehow he got them right. The tablet exploded with light. Not harmful light. It was warm and welcoming, like sunshine after a long winter. The crystal dissolved into millions of glowing particles that swirled around Marcus like a miniature galaxy. Each particle carried information, knowledge, understanding that flowed directly into his mind. He learned about technologies that could heal dying stars, medical techniques that could cure diseases at the genetic level, faster than light travel that didn't require the massive energy expenditures of human jump drives, mathematics that treated space and time like pieces of clay to be shaped and molded. And he learned about the Velthani themselves. They hadn't gone extinct. They had transcended physical existence, uploading their consciousness into crystalline matrices hidden throughout the galaxy. For 50,000 years, they had waited for their chosen inheritors to find them, beings capable of carrying forward their legacy and preventing the galaxy from falling into the same chaos that had destroyed their civilization. They had been waiting for humanity. More specifically, they had been waiting for humans like Marcus, individuals whose genetic code carried markers from an ancient seeding program. The Velthani had visited Earth millions of years ago, leaving subtle changes in the DNA of early hominids. Most humans carried traces of these modifications, but only a few could activate them. Only a few could speak the deep tongue and access the hidden archives. The pirates finally broke through the airlock just as the last of the crystal particles settled into Marcus's skin. 3 armed figures in environmental suits stormed into the cargo hold, weapons raised. "Where is it?" the lead pirate demanded, his voice distorted by his helmet's speakers. "Where's the package?" Marcus turned to face them, and something had changed in his eyes. They glowed with soft, golden light, the same color as the crystal tablet. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made the pirate step backward in unconscious fear. "I am the package," Marcus said in perfect Velthani, though somehow the pirates understood him anyway. "And you have made a terrible mistake." The leader raised his weapon, but Marcus was already moving. The ancient knowledge flowing through his mind included combat techniques that treated physics more like suggestions than laws. He didn't run toward the pirates. He simply stopped being in one place and started being in another. His hand closed around the leader's throat before the man could fire. The other 2 pirates shot at him, but their energy bolts passed harmlessly through his body, like he was made of light and air. "Please," Marcus said, his voice filled with genuine sadness. "You don't have to die today. Leave now, and forget you ever saw me." The pirates looked at each other, then at their leader hanging suspended in Marcus's impossibly strong grip. Without a word, they turned and ran back toward their ship. Marcus gently set the leader down and watched them retreat. As their ship detached and fled into hyperspace, he felt the weight of his new knowledge settling into his mind like snow accumulating during a long winter storm. He was no longer just a delivery boy. The Velthani archive was calling to him from across the galaxy, and he had work to do. Humanity's real education was about to begin, and it would start with a failed package delivery and a young man who had always been terrible at making life decisions. But first, he needed to get his ship fixed. Even transcendent beings needed reliable transportation. Marcus smiled as he headed toward the engine compartment. Some things never changed. No matter how much ancient alien knowledge you absorbed, you still had to deal with the practical stuff first. The Time's Lucky Strike's Times engines coughed back to life under his repairs, which now incorporated techniques that wouldn't be discovered by human science for another 1,000 years. As his ship limped toward Kepler Station, Marcus began composing a message for Dr. Kes Ara Velthani. She was going to be very surprised to learn that her delivery boy could speak her people's most sacred language. Even more surprised to discover that he now carried the genetic keys to unlock secrets that had been hidden since before her species had learned to reach for the stars. The real adventure was just beginning. Number: The Delivery Boy. Second document. Kepler Station hung in the void like a metallic flower, its rotating habitat rings catching starlight from the distant sun. Marcus guided the limping Times Lucky Strike Times toward the docking bays, his mind still reeling from the transformation he'd undergone. The ancient Velthani knowledge sat in his consciousness like a vast library, its contents both overwhelming and strangely familiar. The station's traffic controller, a bored-sounding human named Dave, guided him to a repair dock. "Lucky strike. You're looking pretty beat up there. Want me to call emergency services?" "Negative. Control," Marcus replied, surprised by how calm his own voice sounded. "Just some engine trouble. I can handle the repairs myself." That wasn't entirely true. The old Marcus couldn't have fixed a coffee maker, let alone jury-rigged a faster-than-light drive. But the knowledge flowing through his enhanced mind included engineering principles that made human technology look like stone tools. He could probably rebuild the entire ship with spare parts and some focused willpower. As he powered down his systems and went through the docking checklist, Marcus thought about Dr. Kesara Velthani. According to the information he'd absorbed from the crystal, she was one of the last pure-blood Velthani in the galaxy. Her people had been reduced to a handful of individuals scattered across known space, most of them working as researchers and academics, trying to piece together fragments of their lost civilization. She had no idea that the delivery she was expecting contained the key to everything her people had been searching for. Marcus made his way through the station's corridors, following the signs toward the Vegan Institute's research wing. Kepler Station was a melting pot of different species. He passed groups of tall, ethereal Arcturians, discussing quantum mathematics. Short and stocky Proximan miners, arguing about ore prices, and even a few of the rarely seen crystalline beings from the Vega system's outer moons. But it was the Velthani he was looking for, and he found her in the xenoarchaeology lab. Dr. Kesara Velthani was beautiful in the way that all her people were. Tall and graceful, with skin that had a subtle, iridescent quality, like oil on water. Her hair was the deep blue-black of space between stars, and her eyes were large and luminous, colored the same golden amber as honey. She wore the simple white robes favored by Velthani academics, and she was hunched over a holographic display showing pottery fragments from some long-dead civilization. When Marcus entered the lab, she looked up with the polite smile she probably gave to all delivery personnel. "You must be from Interstellar Express. I've been expecting a package from Dr. Martinez." "That's right," Marcus said, but made no move to hand over the shipping container he carried. Instead, he studied her face, seeing the weight of loss and longing that all surviving Velthani carried. They were a people haunted by the greatness of their ancestors, forever searching for clues about what they'd once been. Dr. Velthani frowned slightly at his hesitation. "Is there a problem with the delivery?" The shipping manifest said it was a pre-war artifact. Marcus set down the empty container. "The artifact was destroyed during transport. Pirates attacked my ship." The color drained from her already pale face. "Destroyed?" But that tablet was irreplaceable. It was the first intact example of deep-tongue writing we'd found in over a century. "No," Marcus said gently. "It wasn't destroyed. It was activated." Before she could ask what he meant, Marcus spoke a single word in the ancient language of her people. It was a greeting, formal and respectful, used when addressing a daughter of the high bloodlines. Dr. Velthani went perfectly still. The word hung in the air between them like a bridge across impossible distances. Her golden eyes widened, and her hand moved unconsciously to her throat in a gesture that was pure Velthani nobility. Shock expressed with unconscious grace. "How?" she whispered, her own voice automatically responding in the deep tongue. "How do you know the formal address? No human has ever spoken our ancient language." Marcus smiled. "Because I'm not entirely human anymore. The crystal tablet wasn't just an artifact, Dr. Velthani. It was a genetic key, and it was meant for me to find." He continued speaking in Velthani, the words flowing from his lips like water from a spring. He told her about the attack, about touching the crystal, about the voices that had welcomed him home. He explained about the genetic markers hidden in human DNA, about the ancient seeding program, about the waiting archives that contained the lost knowledge of her people. With each word, Dr. Velthani's expression shifted from shock to wonder to something approaching reverence. When he finished speaking, she was crying, tears of joy that sparkled like liquid starlight on her iridescent cheeks. "The archives," she breathed. You're saying they really exist? All these years we thought they were just legends, stories told to children about the glory days. They're real. Marcus confirmed. And I can take you to them. But first, I need your help understanding something. The knowledge I've gained comes with responsibilities I don't fully comprehend yet. The Velthani, who uploaded themselves to the crystals. They're still alive. Aren't they? Still conscious? Dr. Velthani nodded, composing herself with visible effort. According to our oldest texts, yes, the Great Transcendence was supposed to be a way of preserving our civilization beyond physical death. But the war came too soon, and the Transcendence was incomplete. Most of the crystal matrices were lost or destroyed, but not all of them, Marcus said. The voices in the crystal showed me locations, star charts, coordinates for dozens of hidden archives. Your people didn't just preserve their knowledge, they preserved themselves, waiting for the right time to emerge. Dr. Velth and I stood up from her workstation, her movements fluid and deliberate. Show me, she commanded. And Marcus realized that beneath her academic exterior was a core of steel that spoke of royal bloodlines and ancient authority. Marcus extended his hand, palm up, and concentrated. The golden light returned to his eyes as he accessed the information the crystal had imprinted on his genetic code. Above his palm, a holographic star map materialized, showing the locations of 17 different archive sites scattered across the galaxy. By the dying light of Velthar, Dr. Velthani whispered, using an oath so ancient that even Marcus's enhanced knowledge could barely translate it. 17 sites. We always believed there might be one or two that survived, but 17. This is just the beginning, Marcus told her. The knowledge in these archives isn't just historical, it's practical. Technologies that could revolutionize everything from medicine to faster-than-light travel. Agricultural techniques that could turn dead worlds into garden planets. Energy sources that could power entire civilizations without depleting natural resources. Dr. Velthani studied the star map with the intensity of a general planning a campaign. The nearest site is in the Rigel system, about 2 weeks' travel from here. But Mr. Chen, may I call you Marcus? You must understand what you're proposing. If these archives really contain the knowledge you describe, it could destabilize the entire galactic political structure. End quote. Quote. Marcus nodded grimly. I know. There are already people who want to control this information. The pirates who attacked me weren't working independently. Someone leaked the location of the crystal tablet and hired them to steal it. Do you have any idea who? Not yet. But I think we need to be very careful about who we trust. This knowledge is powerful enough to reshape civilization, which means it's powerful enough to start wars. Dr. Velthani was quiet for a long moment, her golden eyes distant as she contemplated the implications. Finally, she looked back at Marcus, with determination written across her features. Then we'll have to make sure it falls into the right hands, she said. Marcus, I'm formally requesting passage aboard your ship to the Rigel Archive. As a direct descendant of the Velthani royal house, I have both the right and the responsibility to help guide this discovery. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Royal house? You didn't mention that in your introduction, she smiled. And for the first time, since he'd entered the lab, she looked genuinely happy. We don't advertise our lineages anymore. There's not much point in claiming to be royalty when your entire civilization fits in a small apartment building. But my full name is Kesara Velthani Mordun Kes, 47th daughter of the Silver Throne of Velthar. If the archives are real, and if they contain what you say they do, then my people aren't extinct after all. Marcus felt a surge of understanding from the voices that still whispered in the back of his mind. The Velthani, who had undergone the Great Transcendence, were reacting to the presence of one of their living descendants. Their joy was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. They know you're here, he told her. The transcended Velthani in the crystal matrices. They're aware of what's happening, and they're Excited isn't the right word. They're fulfilled, like they've been holding their breath for 50,000 years, and can finally exhale. Dr. Veldhani, Princess Kessera, Marcus reminded himself, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. I can feel them, she whispered. Just at the edge of consciousness, like voices calling from very far away. How is that possible? Genetic resonance, Marcus explained, though he was still figuring it out himself. Your royal bloodline carries more of the original Veldhani genetic markers than most of your people. Being in proximity to someone who's activated the crystal knowledge creates a sympathetic connection. She opened her eyes and looked at him with new understanding. You're not just carrying their knowledge, are you? You're carrying them. The transcended consciousness didn't just imprint information on the crystals. They made themselves part of the inheritance. Marcus nodded slowly. It was a truth he'd been avoiding. But she was right. The voices in his mind weren't just recordings or data transfers. They were actual people, actual consciousness that had been preserved in crystalline form and was now sharing space in his enhanced brain. Which means, Princess Kess, Ara continued, that you're the first human Veldhani hybrid in galactic history. A bridge between our species. Before Marcus could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the lab in pulsing red illumination, and an automated voice began announcing a station-wide alert. All personnel to emergency stations. Unidentified vessels approaching. This is not a drill. Marcus and Princess Kessera ran to the lab's main viewport. In the distance, silhouetted against the gas giant's swirling clouds, a fleet of ships was approaching Kepler Station. They were sleek and predatory, obviously military vessels, but they flew no identification markers that either human or Veldhani databases could recognize. Those aren't pirates, Princess Kessera said grimly. That's a full battle fleet. Someone knows what we've discovered, and they're not taking any chances. Marcus felt the ancient knowledge stirring in his mind. Defensive protocols activating as the Veldhani consciousness prepared for battle. Then we'd better get out of here before they arrive. Can you grab whatever research materials you need? We're leaving now. As they hurried through the station corridors toward the docking bays, Marcus realized that his quiet life as a failed delivery boy was officially over. He was now the guardian of knowledge that could save or destroy galactic civilization, and there were apparently people willing to start a war to control it. The real question was whether a reformed package delivery service and a princess with no kingdom could stay ahead of them long enough to reach the archives and wake up the sleeping gods of a dead civilization. Behind them, the mysterious fleet continued its approach, and Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling that his problems were just beginning number. The delivery boy. Third document. The Times Lucky Strike Times screamed away from Kepler Station just as the first energy weapons began to fire. Marcus pushed his rebuilt engines to their absolute limits. The Veldhani modifications, allowing performance that should have been impossible for a civilian cargo hauler. Behind them, the mysterious fleet was systematically destroying the station's defensive platforms while boarding shuttles swarmed toward the habitat rings. They're not even trying to negotiate, Princess Kessera observed from the co-pilot's seat, her voice remarkably calm for someone watching thousands of people die. Whatever organization is behind this, they're willing to commit mass murder to get their hands on the archive locations. Marcus grimaced as he threw the ship into a spiraling, evasive pattern. Energy bolts from pursuing fighters lit up the space around them like deadly fireworks. Any ideas who might have that kind of firepower and that little conscience? Unfortunately, yes. Princess Kessera's fingers danced over the sensor displays, her royal education, apparently including advanced starship operations. The configuration of those vessels matches intelligence reports about the hegemony's Black Fleet. Shadow ships that don't officially exist. Marcus felt his blood run cold. The corporate hegemony was humanity's largest interstellar government, controlling nearly 40% of human space through a combination of economic pressure and military might. If they were involved, this was much bigger than pirates trying to steal an artifact. How would they even know about the crystal? He asked, pulling the ship into a tight loop around a passing asteroid. The pursuing fighters overshot, buying them a few precious seconds. The same way they know about everything else, Princess Kessera replied bitterly. They have informants everywhere, corporate espionage, bribed officials, compromised communication networks. Dr. Martinez probably sent her shipping request through channels the hegemony monitors. An energy bolt clipped their port shield, sending warning lights cascading across the control panel. Marcus gritted his teeth and poured more power into the engines, drawing on Velthani techniques that treated the laws of physics more like gentle suggestions than absolute rules. "I'm jumping to hyperspace," he announced. "Coordinates, set for the Rigel system." "Wait." Princess Kessera grabbed his arm. "If the hegemony knows about the archives, they'll be waiting for us at Rigel. We need to choose a different destination." Marcus paused, his hand hovering over the hyperspace controls. She was right. But they didn't have many options. The fleet behind them was closing fast, and his ship couldn't outfight military vessels no matter how much alien knowledge he'd absorbed. That was when the voices spoke to him. Not the whispered guidance he'd been receiving from the transcended Velthani, but a clear, direct communication that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Every crystal matrix in the galaxy was suddenly active, their preserved consciousness reaching across impossible distances to offer aid. Asterisk, child of two worlds. Asterisk, they said in perfect harmony. Asterisk, there is another way. The knowledge you carry is not just information, it is power itself. Use it. Asterisk. Use what? Marcus muttered, but even as he spoke, understanding flooded his enhanced mind. The Velthani hadn't just been advanced in conventional technology, they had learned to manipulate space-time directly, treating the fundamental forces of reality like tools in a cosmic workshop. The techniques were incredibly dangerous, misused. They could collapse local space-time and create singularities that would devour star systems. But used correctly, Marcus closed his eyes and reached out with senses he didn't know he possessed. He could feel the fabric of space around them, the quantum foam that underlied all reality, the invisible currents that faster than light travel depended upon. And he could change them. "Marcus?" Princess Kessera's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Marcus? What are you doing?" Marcus opened his eyes, and they blazed with golden light so bright that the ship's instruments registered it as a radiation source. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made the bulkheads vibrate sympathetically. "I'm taking us somewhere safe," he said in a tone that was only partly his own. He reached out and twisted. Reality folded like origami. The Time's lucky strike times and its pursuers suddenly occupied the same space as a star system that was simultaneously 3 light-years away and exactly where they'd always been. The pursuing fighters flew directly into a gas giant that existed in a completely different sector of space, their pilots too confused by the impossible physics to even scream before their ships were crushed by atmospheric pressure. When space unfolded itself again, Marcus and Princess Kessera were alone in the void between stars, while somewhere far behind them, the hegemony fleet tried to figure out how their targets had simply vanished. "By all the ancestors," Princess Kessera whispered, her eyes wide with awe and terror. "You just performed a dimensional fold. Without a ship-sized fold generator, without massive energy expenditures, without..." She trailed off, apparently unable to find words for what she'd witnessed. Marcus slumped forward in his pilot's chair, exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. The golden light faded from his eyes, leaving him looking pale and shaky. "Yeah, well, don't ask me to do it again anytime soon. I think I just burned out half my neural pathways. But..." Princess Kessera was studying the sensor readings with the intensity of someone trying to solve an impossible equation. "Marcus, according to these displays, we're currently located in 17 different star systems simultaneously. That should be completely impossible. The fold is collapsing," Marcus explained, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "Give it another few minutes, and we'll settle into normal space-time, probably somewhere in the Rigel system, since that's where I was thinking about when I twisted reality into a pretzel." As if summoned by his words, the bizarre sensor readings began to stabilize. Star positions shifted and solidified until they showed a familiar red giant star, surrounded by the usual collection of planets and space stations. Rigel, Princess Kessara confirmed. But we're not at the coordinates for the archive. We're in the outer system, near the asteroid mining operations. Marcus nodded weakly. Probably for the best. If the hegemony really does know about the archives, the smart move is to approach carefully rather than jumping in with all guns blazing. They spent the next several hours conducting long-range scans of the inner system while Marcus recovered from his reality-bending exertions. What they found was disturbing. The asteroid belt where the archive should be located was swarming with corporate hegemony ships, including several massive excavation vessels and a full battlecruiser squadron. They're mining, Princess Kessara said, her voice tight with anger. They're strip mining the entire asteroid field, looking for the archive. Marcus studied the tactical display, his enhanced knowledge automatically calculating approach vectors and defensive positions. They don't know exactly where it is, though, if they did, they'd have found it by now, instead of tearing apart every rock in the belt. That's because they're looking in the wrong place, Princess Kessara realized. Marcus, call up that holographic star map again. Show me the exact coordinates for the Rigel archive. Marcus concentrated, and the golden map materialized above the control console. Princess Kessara studied it carefully, then compared it to their current sensor readings. I thought so, she said with satisfaction. The coordinates aren't for an asteroid. They're for empty space about 2 million kilometers from the primary mining operations. The archive isn't hidden inside a rock. It's hidden inside a fold in space-time itself. Marcus felt the voices in his mind stir with approval. A pocket dimension. Of course, the Velthani wouldn't just bury their most precious treasures where anyone could dig them up. They'd create an entirely separate space and anchor it to specific coordinates. Can you access it? Princess Kessara asked. The same way you folded space to escape the fleet? Marcus considered the question, feeling for the techniques the crystal knowledge had given him. Maybe. But it'll be risky. Dimensional manipulation near a gravity well is exponentially more dangerous than doing it in open space. If I make a mistake, we could end up scattered across several different universes. And if we don't try, Princess Kessara pointed out, the hegemony will eventually expand their search pattern and find the archive themselves. How long do you think galactic civilization will last when they have access to Velthani technology? Marcus didn't need to answer that question. The corporate hegemony was already the most powerful human government in known space. Give them access to technologies that could manipulate space-time, heal genetic damage, and transform dead worlds into garden planets, and they'd become unstoppable. The other species of the galaxy would face a choice between slavery and extinction. All right, he said, settling back into the pilot's chair. But if this goes wrong, and we end up as quantum particles scattered across the multiverse, I'm blaming you in whatever afterlife we end up in. Princess Kessara smiled. Noted and accepted. Now, show these corporate thugs what happens when they mess with sleeping gods. Marcus guided the times, lucky strike times, toward the coordinates indicated by the star map, keeping their emissions to minimum to avoid detection by the hegemony fleet. When they reached the specified location, there was nothing visible except empty space and distant stars. But Marcus could feel something. The same voices that had welcomed him when he first touched the crystal tablet were calling out again. Stronger now, and filled with anticipation. 50,000 years of waiting was about to end. He reached out with his enhanced senses, feeling for the dimensional anchor that held the archive pocket in place. It was there, invisible to conventional sensors, but blazing like a beacon to his modified perception. A doorway between realities, sealed with genetic locks that only someone carrying Velthani markers could open. Here we go, Marcus said, and began to carefully, delicately twist space-time. Reality shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. For a moment, the stars seemed to bend and shift, creating impossible angles and perspectives that hurt to look at directly. Then, with a sensation like stepping through a soap bubble, The time's lucky strike times passed into somewhere else entirely. They emerged in a vast spherical chamber, carved from what looked like a single, massive crystal. The walls pulsed with soft golden light, and floating platforms extended from the curved surfaces at impossible angles. Each platform held artifacts, devices, and data storage systems that represented the pinnacle of Velthani science and culture. But most importantly, in the center of the sphere, a figure waited for them. She was clearly Velthani, but unlike any living member of the species Marcus had ever seen. Her form was composed entirely of crystalline light, semi-transparent, and glowing with the same golden radiance that filled the archive. She was beautiful in a way that transcended physical existence, and when she smiled, it was with the joy of a parent welcoming a long-lost child. "Welcome home," she said in the deep tongue, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the crystal walls. "I am Velzara Morthani, keeper of the first archive. I have been waiting for you both." Princess Kessera fell to her knees, overcome by the presence of her transcended ancestor. "Great Mother," she whispered, "we thought all the keepers were lost." "Not lost, child of my blood," Velzara replied gently. "Waiting, learning, preparing for the day when the children of both our species would be ready to inherit what we preserved." She turned to Marcus, and he felt the full weight of 50,000 years of accumulated wisdom and love. "And you, bridge builder, speaker of the deep tongue, carrier of the ancient gifts, you have done well. The journey was difficult, but you have brought our daughter home to us." Marcus found his voice with difficulty. "The corporate hegemony knows about the archives. They're searching for them, with military fleets. If they gain access to Velthani technology, they will not," Velzara said with quiet certainty. "The time of hiding is over. The transcended consciousness of my people has voted, and we have decided to emerge from our long sleep. But we will not allow our gifts to be used for conquest and oppression." The crystalline keeper raised her hand, and the archive walls began to sing with harmonies that spoke of awakening and renewal. "The knowledge we preserved was never meant for one species alone. It was meant for those wise enough to use it responsibly, regardless of their genetic heritage. You, Marcus Chen, have proven that wisdom is not limited by bloodline." "What happens now?" Princess Kessera asked, rising to her feet. Velzara smiled. "Now we teach. Now we share. Now we help the galaxy grow into something worthy of the stars we have given you to explore. The corporate hegemony believes it can control transcendent knowledge through force. They are about to learn that some gifts can only be received by those who approach them with open hands and peaceful hearts." The archive continued to sing, its song spreading outward through dimensions, to wake the sleeping guardians in 16 other hidden chambers. Across the galaxy, other keepers began to stir, ready to emerge after 50 millennia of patient waiting. Marcus looked at Princess Kessera, seeing wonder and determination in her golden eyes. "Ready to help save galactic civilization?" She laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the crystalline chamber. "I thought you were just a delivery boy." "I was," Marcus replied, grinning. "Turns out, I was delivering something bigger than either of us realized. Together, with the blessing of the transcended Velthani and the power of technologies that could reshape reality itself, a failed package delivery driver, and an exiled princess, prepared to give the galaxy the greatest gift any civilization could receive: the chance to become something better than it had ever dreamed possible."